You can make a difference. You can give hope to a child.
Hey folks, before we get started today, we wanted to tell you about the Kids Hope USA ping pong contest. Dave, give us some details.
Well, you can check out all the details on the website, but briefly, here's what's going on. We have this video contest going where if you can shoot a video with your cell phone about a ping pong ball landing in a cup with Kids Hope USA logo on it, you can upload that onto YouTube. We're going to base the winning video on how many hits, how many views are on YouTube. But there's cash and prizes available. You can go on the website to check out all the details. But Chris, it's worth firing up that video piece on your cell phone and putting a ping pong ball in a cup for. Let me tell you why.
Because you could be the winner.
All right, now let's go do the one-on-one thing.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome to another episode of One-on-One. My name is Dave Staal.
And I'm Chris Reinsma. And today, Dave, we are going to be talking about the 4 dynamics of communicating with kids. And there's kind of an art and a science to this. So let's jump right in and talk about some communication dynamics. Let's start with talking about concrete communication versus abstract communication and how that might develop in a relationship.
I'm not sure I know what you mean. I'm kidding you.
Okay, all right.
All right. Basically, kids understand concrete terms and language better than they understand abstract
Absolutely.
terms and language. Now, I think all of us understand that, but it's a matter of practically putting that truth into use that causes the stumbling blocks.
Sure.
And maybe what I do is I'll give you a quick example of this.
That'd be great.
Because, as you know, I mentor a little guy, and yesterday we were talking about reading in class and answering questions. And I said to him, well, yeah, do you ever have it when your mind goes blank and you start thinking this? And he looked at me and he said, what?
Mind goes blank.
Mind goes blank. And he's trying to picture his mind being completely blank. And it never is completely blank. It's
Right.
jumping around from all sorts of things. But what I had to do is rephrase it and say, you know, when you're sitting in class and you're thinking about stuff that isn't related to what the teacher is talking about.
Right.
And you get called on, and all of a sudden you don't know what the answer is because you haven't been thinking about it. And he said, yeah, that happens to me all the time. So, you know, it was a matter of taking, you know, your mind goes blank. Both you and I know what that is. Taking it out and being very specific about it. You know, and that's a more extreme example. Another one is when you say to your, you know, the kid you're mentoring, you know, I'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Or I'll see you later, or see you whatever. It's best to say, I'll see you next week Monday at 2:45. Getting very, very specific with terms and language helps kids understand because their perspective, their knowledge of life and language isn't what ours is, Chris.
Right.
And so we just have to be sensitive to that so that we clearly communicate with them and so that we both know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and when you do that, when you are very concrete with kids, I think it's very helpful for them because then there's, I think, that shared understanding that's built between the two of you.
Exactly, exactly. And, you know, Chris, though, there's sort of a qualifier to that, and there's qualifiers on all of these, but a qualifier to that is, what about the different developmental levels that kids are at? How does that play into this?
Well, I think when we think about developmental levels, all kids are developing at different levels in different areas. And so there's a difference between the developmental level that a kid is at and maybe their chronological age level. And so all 8-year-olds are not necessarily the same. Right. Some 8-year-olds might developmentally be very advanced academically or socially or emotionally or not. And so every kid, I think, is a little bit different in terms of how they are developmentally related to their chronological age. So let's take an example. Let's take an 8-year-old student who may be very, very advanced academically. So in terms of their developmental capacity academically, they're really high. But you know what? They also may be very average in terms of their social skills.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit different there. So I think what we have to really recognize when we're communicating with our students is that they may be different socially, emotionally, behaviorally, and academically. They may be operating at different levels. So their chronological age may be one thing. They may have different levels on all those factors. And I think part of our job as mentors is to figure out where they are developmentally and meet them at that spot, because we really can't expect them to do things that are beyond their developmental capacity. And because of their experiences, because of who they are biologically, they may be developing at a slower rate than maybe our kids or other kids we know in our neighborhood, and we can't really expect them to go faster or beyond that.
So maybe as we're swapping stories within our programs, and you have 3 students who are all second graders, then is what you're saying that we shouldn't be comparing necessarily how each one of them is doing with different activities? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a dangerous thing to do, because you might tend to feel like, wow, I'm so far ahead of these other mentor-mentee matches, or I'm behind. And it really isn't about that. It really is about focusing on where your student is developmentally and meeting them at that place. So the comparison really isn't very helpful for any good reason. So I'd stay away from that. I think that's good counsel.
That's great. Now, also, Chris, when we're thinking about relating to kids and communicating with them, tell us about the importance of context and what we need to keep in mind with respect to context.
Well, when we walk into the mentoring relationship, we've had a certain set of experiences, life experiences that we grew up with maybe, or that we're experiencing now as adults. And we tend to think that the kids that we're working with have those same set of experiences or expectations about life. And while that may be true sometimes, often it's not true. And so I think we really have to remember the context that our students are growing up in. What are they experiencing? What are their lives really like? And then as we're teaching them, as we're talking to them, as we're building relationships, we have to work hard to try to relate things back to their context and what they're experiencing, and not just assume that what we've experienced and how we're talking about things, that they'll understand that. Let me give you an example that I've used before. When in my neighborhood, we have a corner store. And all the kids in my neighborhood go to the corner store very frequently. And so anytime any kid gets their allowance or has some money, you just see them back and forth down the street, and they're going there and they're buying all sorts of candy. If I were teaching a math lesson to one of the kids in my neighborhood, and they weren't really getting concepts of quarters, nickels, and dimes and all this, I would relate it back to going to the corner store and how much candy could you buy for a certain amount, because that's something that they do and they'll practice and they'll actually use, which is going to help them remember it. So that's really contextualizing a math lesson to their life experience, and I think that kind of stuff can be really, really helpful to help kids as they're learning things, for sure.
And amazingly, every other Friday, when we have payday here, Chris goes to the corner store.
I do as well. And there's some really special things that I get every week. Dave, another thing that I think sometimes can impede our communication with kids is the level of detail that we communicate. And sometimes that seems like it may not be helpful. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Chris, when we're trying to relate things to kids, maybe put it in context for their lives, what can happen is we can share a detail or mention a detail, a fact or whatever, that will cause a child to completely abandon the thought train or trail that we're on and go on a tangent. And then all of a sudden, your discussion just goes way off, and it's because they're completely distracted. Maybe for a moment, maybe for the hour.
What kind of trigger? Can you give an example of something like that?
Yeah, I'll give you 2. One that's fun, one that's a little more serious. Okay. The fun one is this: when I was just fresh out of college, first stop for me out of college was with the Indianapolis Colts in 1985, the NFL team. Yeah. And so, if I'm sitting with my little guy that I mentor, and I talk to him at all about my, something that happened in my life, and I mentioned that I was with the Indianapolis Colts, all that, he's going to be completely distracted, trying to picture me in shoulder pads and a helmet, trying to wonder what position I play.
Right.
And the reason I know that is
Right.
that you and all of you are doing that right now too, trying to figure out what position did that guy play. But you see, so I don't mention stuff like that. Now that's a fun one. A little more serious one is, this past weekend, which is, we're airing this on May 11th. This past weekend was Mother's Day. Okay, when I meet with my little guy and we talk about our weekends, okay, if he asks me what I did and I talk about Mother's Day, here's what's going to happen. He's going to go off into a place that isn't a lot of fun to think about because the relationship with he and his mom is very strained and very distant. And so I would want to make sure that I don't mention my own mom, although I love her, I don't mention her when he and I are together because I know that's a source of pain in his life. So it's being sensitive to your child as far as knowing what are those details and triggers that will completely distract them and actually be counterproductive
Right.
to the communication flow that you have.
Right. And some of those distractions too might be things like, you mentioned the word recess, or you talk about lunch, you talk about a friend or somebody else at school that they really like, and all of a sudden they're in a really different place, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, and they just take it. And you know what? Sometimes that's not bad,
No.
Chris, because there might be something that is in a child's mind and heart that they really want to share. And again, that was somewhat abstract language. They might have thoughts that they'd like to express, not that there's something in their mind they want to share that can't reach in their head and all that. You know what I mean? But it's okay for them to be able to steer the conversation at times. It's when I'm trying to make a point and I know that something is going to take my little guy to maybe a place that isn't a productive conversation or is a source of pain or whatever. I need to avoid those. And again, after you've had experience with your child, you'll understand what those points of context are that you can relate to, as well as those details that you can choose to avoid. So that makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Speaking of some details, there are some details that we have to deal with during every one-on-one episode. And one of those details, Dave, is that we have to find a winner.
So as Chris pulls a ball out of our basket here, let me explain what's going to happen. If your program's name is called, then you have 24 hours until 5 p.m. Eastern Time on May the 12th to contact the national office. And when you do, you'll win a $100 gift certificate to the new Kids Hope USA online store that's going to launch in August. So if your name is called, you have until 5 o'clock on May 12th. Chris, who needs to contact us?
The winner this time, Dave, is Pat Jasper from Hope Community Church in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Wow.
This was our first program in the state of Arizona, and we trained Pat in Boulder, Colorado, and she's doing a great job out there. So congratulations, Pat.
Way to go, Pat. You have until 5 o'clock on May the 12th to contact us. If you know Pat, and you're wondering, oh, gosh, I wonder if she knows that she won. Make sure you give her a call, send her an email, tell her to watch this episode so that she can call and get that $100 gift certificate to the new Kids Hope USA online store that launches in August.
Just kind of summing up what we talked about today. We talked about 4 dynamics of communicating with kids. We talked about concrete versus abstract. We talked about recognizing developmental levels for kids, thinking about the context that they're living in, and also thinking about details and what details are helpful and not helpful. And when we do that, Dave, I think remembering those things, we can really expect to have a good foundation for communication with our students.
Yeah, and communication with your child is what this program is all about. It's all about you sitting down for an hour and having some great communication, because within that communication, Chris, we know time and time again what happens, and that is that a life will change. And when you change a life,
That's no small change. Okay, Dave, so we got this communication thing.
right, yeah,
The first thing we're going to talk about is concrete.
cement. Why are we talking about cement?
That's what it says.
Streets?
That's what it
I mean,
says.
what are
It
we
says
talking about
it
streets
says
and sidewalks here?
it says concrete on here on my sheet.
Great. Yeah, that'll be a fun one. Hey, cement head.
Yeah.
You know, okay. And then this other thing, it says chronicology. I don't even know how you pronounce that word.
Is Elise around?
No, she better help us out. Hey, Elise,